Do you ever just enjoy a game so much you can't seem to stop playing it? Even when the game is beat, you've obtained every accolade, unearthed all of the secrets that are hidden, you still find yourself wanting to press the button to begin your journey anew. In this day and age, that's when people typically get around to watching challenge playthroughs or even speedruns of games to fill that need. Hey, that's a topic we talk about here. These challenges help with experiencing your favorite adventure in a fresh way, breathing life into otherwise shelved cartridges that would simply be collecting dust in a box somewhere. But what if you want something more? Something that can change nearly everything about your favorite game? Don't you worry, inquisitive viewer. Today, I've got you covered. Welcome to the Top 10 RPG Randomizer Speedruns. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe if you want to know when I upload a new video. We're going to reach 100,000 subs this year, and pressing that button will etch your name into internet history for all of eternity. With that out of the way, let me lay down some criteria for this overview. I'm not going to be going over any randomizer speedruns outside of traditional RPGs. This means that action-adventure RPGs, Metroidvanias, and other games will not be mentioned here. Sorry, Legend of Zelda, you're going to have to wait for another video. However, I will be leaving a comprehensive list of randomizers in a description for you to check out. As for what I'm covering, I'll give a short history on when the randomizer was released and who developed it, then a few mechanics of the mod and reasons why it stands out from the others. I'll also go over how long it takes to get through these randomizers in general. The Final Fantasy VII randomizer is the first one that we have on our list. Released on January 17th, 2020 by Sega Chief, this randomizer takes one of the most popular RPGs of all time, gives the player control over little things like character stat growths, and more consequential options like making entire encounters random with dangerous abilities. Playing through with some of the options selected can make for some very interesting and even hilarious situations, some of which that don't allow the player to even get through the game. With some of the unsafe settings, it's very easy to cause the game to lock up and cause runs to simply not finish. That being said, I tried to find some completed speedruns of the Final Fantasy VII randomizer, and I couldn't find much for a single sitting besides a run clocking in at about 11 hours from Matako. I'm sure there are other runs of this out there, but either the streams were not saved, or they're buried so deep that no one can find them. Unfortunately, the game is still fairly linear and limited in scope compared to the original version. This means that there's not really a world already open to the player, and most story events need to be progressed through to beat the game. The main reason this gets listed is because of the sheer popularity of the title, but the current options and lack of modern community involvement put this at the bottom of my list. I'll have to admit, this one was the hardest one for me to place outside of the top 3, because every randomizer in this list, while having flaws, are actually incredible to play. So coming in at number 9 is the Bravely Default 2 randomizer, with the first release coming fairly recently on June 2021 by Marvin42. This is a weird one, because it has less features than the Final Fantasy VII randomizer, but the combination of how the quality of life options make the game much more enjoyable, and the fact that it's the most modern RPG randomizer on this list gives it a little bit of an edge. Some of the main things that this game allows for are randomized bosses, job abilities and stats, and it also updates shops with different items depending on what options it sets. Like the Final Fantasy VII randomizer, it ends up being pretty linear in progression, so you'll find yourself enjoying this one more with the casual playthrough. However, if you expect to run this in a single setting, give yourself about 6 hours or more depending on your familiarity with the game. With these reasons, and the fact that the randomizer is a little bit faster than the Final Fantasy VII one, I ranked this above that one in our list. For the next game in our list, we're going to revisit a game we covered back in February called Phantasy Star 4. Lady Starbird, one of the people I talked about assisting in absolutely breaking the speedrun a few years back, is the main developer of this randomizer, with its initial release back in 2017 and having updates as recent as November 2021. So what brings us above the other two that I mentioned earlier? This is our first randomizer that has true gameplay changes from the vanilla experience. We can randomize the basic things like stats, items, and even bosses all day, but why not take it a step further and slap a new game mode or two on there? Want a checklist of random things to complete in order to open up the final area of the game? Check out the Hunter's Mark mode. This mode lets you take on 8 random quests that you get from the Hunters Guild, allowing for interesting routing and decision making based on a preset given to the player. Another mode called Ring Hunt does something a bit more special though. The 5 rings of stars are used to open up the edge and allows access to the final boss. Simple enough, but there's also the fact that all the spaceports are open and you get access to the final vehicle of the game, the hydrofoil. This means that any linearity with the game is now wiped away and an open-ended experience is now possible. Between the different game modes, they can take anywhere from a couple hours for the Hunter's Mark mode to even longer with the Ring Hunt mode. So if you wanted to take on this behemoth of a randomizer, it wouldn't take too long. There's also a good community of folks to help out and even race to help hone your skills if you wanted, so keep that in mind as well. Before moving on, I just want to point out that most of the games above this one on the list are going to feature major changes such as these, building upon the awesome things that were presented already. So if you thought this randomizer was awesome, wait until you see our next one. 10 billion. That's how many different possibilities can come from our next entry's randomizer. Final Fantasy VI is already a wonderful game for casual players and speedrunners alike, and it only becomes better through its Beyond Chaos EX mod. This current version of the randomizer is actually an extension from the original Beyond Chaos mod by legendary randomizer developer Abyssanim. Abyssanim specializes in randomizing games in a way that's akin to the Lufia 2 Ancient Cave minigame mode. This means that rooms and progression are similar to roguelike games that have random aspects to them, with the boss being present after a certain amount of rooms. His signature can be seen in the roots of many randomizers in the community, so don't be surprised if we run into him later. In mid-2014, the original Beyond Chaos randomizer was created, and eventually evolved into having massive contributions from other developers such as Subtraction Soup. In 2019, the randomizer added the EX at the end, and the rest is history. With the latest official build coming out in July of 2020, it features so many customization options that it's hard to know what to do with them. With that being said, let's get the bad stuff out of the way now. While the open world option is available like one of our previous games, getting the airship early and doing the events out of order can lock up the game. So there is still a sort of linearity to deal with in that aspect. However, the randomizer more than makes up for that in the robust options that are given to the player for control. With 6 possible game modes and nearly 100 flags to change, the possibilities for taking down the Mad God Kefka are endless. Boss randomizations, sprite changes, music updates, and much more make taking on FF6 a fun and even more difficult experience. The mod even has a bingo card generator that randomly selects certain aspects of the game for the player to complete, allowing for easy racing with friends. Speaking of beating the game fast, this is another reason that the randomizer doesn't rank higher than it does now. With most playthroughs of a generated seed taking a few sessions, people opt to take on shorter runs like ending on the Kefka at Narsh fight. So if you're looking for a fast, full game experience with this one, then you may want to look elsewhere. However, for a casual experience, it's one of the best available. Moving on to the next game on our list, it actually may surprise you on how it beats out a juggernaut like this one, but it definitely deserves the number 6 spot. Just a quick note before we keep going, another randomizer mod was brought to my attention really late in the scripting called Final Fantasy VI Worlds Collide. This thing is a beast, but since I already have an FF6 randomizer listed, we'll keep this as a massive honorable mention. Okay, moving on now. Our next game to make the list is one that the RPG community is absolutely divided about. Quest 64 suffers from being half RPG and half giant boulder simulator, but a tool named Moreau made by developer Hangman with the support of many others changes all that to make an absurd experience. With the randomizer popping up in early 2021 and being kept current all the way up to version 46 as of February of this year, it features an open world and different game modes like our last game mentioned. It also features some quality of life fixes that make the gameplay much better than the original. From reworking how experience is calculated, to fast transporting through large empty areas, the game doesn't even need randomization to make it better to play. However, the randomization options are mind-boggling, and it can be seen that a lot of care went into the development of these amazing features. The speedrunning community even has weekly races to keep their skills sharp and the developer on his toes, showing how dedicated they are to the life of this cult classic. These times for completion by veteran Quest 64 speedrunners average around the 2-hour mark, depending on the game mode that they select. I know you're probably wondering why I put this over Final Fantasy VI, but honestly this randomizer is an absolute blast. Between that and the active community, it absolutely pushes itself ahead of its competitors. Which means our next game has to be really special, right? How about one of the most popular randomizers of all time? Halfway through our list of games, we have one of our most well-known randomizers out there. In fact, if we were rating this based on a popularity contest alone, this one would be number 1. Welcome to the world of Pokemon randomizers. These randomizer mods gave birth to some of the largest waves of content that the world had ever seen. Seriously, like 1/10 of gaming channels that take themselves somewhat seriously have probably played a Pokemon randomizer. To dive back into what the randomizer was originally, we need to jump back almost 12 years to March of 2010, where a user named Metapod23 had a ROM hack randomizer titled the Ash Gray randomized version. About a year and a half after that, with some more ROM hack randomizers being released, a modder by the name of Artemis251 released their first version of the groundbreaking Pokemon Emerald randomizer. The reason it was groundbreaking? It was the first time someone had decided to randomize the vanilla game, and not just a ROM hack. From there, the Pokemon randomizer scene over the years has exploded in popularity, and has spawned some of the most iconic challenge runs of all time. With that being said, I probably don't need to tell you what a randomizer Nuzlocke is. I'm going to keep this entry as a series because there's so many variations of the entire randomizer in game modes, whether it be palette swaps, dialogue changes, or whatever else you can think of. The modifications make for endless fun if you dive deep enough. Having such a variety of games means that completion times can be some of the shortest ever in any randomizer, or some of the longest depending on what game you're playing, so an average time for completion can't truly be given here. With all this being said, you're probably wondering, why in the world isn't this ranked higher on the list? Believe it or not, some of these games coming up absolutely change how the game is played without ever truly changing the base game itself. Not just that, but the collaboration in the communities to make their randomizer better is completely unrivaled. Getting closer to the top of the list, we have another masterpiece that was developed by Ainsky with the help of Abyssinum and Myself86. The Wings of Time randomizer for Chrono Trigger had its first full release back in August of 2019, and eventually received a big update to be known today as the Jets of Time randomizer. As the name suggests, this changes Chrono Trigger into an open-ended RPG from the beginning of the game, instead of only opening up after getting the epoch much later on. That means, like some of the other randomizers, it features shuffling of key items to create a lock and key system for events, randomizing of several smaller aspects of the game, and updated level scaling to prevent grinding before fighting Lavos. For the remake that's still being maintained today, additional game modes were added for replayability and other small tweaks. For example, there's a custom mode called Lost Worlds that starts the player in 2300 AD, but allows for exploration of that, 12,000 BC, and prehistory in any way they'd like. There's a lot more options for randomization than what I'll cover here, but the selections available for the player are absolutely massive in scope. With such a large game, you'd think that it would take quite a while to complete, not allowing for a single sitting run. Thankfully, with how open-ended runs are and the possibility of fighting Lavos being opened up so early, runs average at about the 2.5 hour mark for those familiar with the game and randomizer. One of the reasons I put this above the Pokemon randomizer is that the community is incredibly active in facilitating races and even hold tournaments for the scene. In 2021, there was a tournament that featured 26 matches between runners in the community with detailed runner commentary. Things like this are essential to keeping the mod fresh in people's minds, and the activity encourages the continued development of the randomizer. The communities in the upper echelon of this list help propel the games to the top, and moving into the top 3, you'll see how that's the case. Most of you who know me from before covering various speedrunning communities will know that I was hopelessly addicted to a randomizer called the Earthbound Ancient Cave. This beast of a ROM hack stemmed from another Abyssinum creation, where he turned the game into a labyrinth of rooms that eventually progressed into a final boss. Sounds familiar, right? This was eventually picked up and refined by developer Chaz, who works on other games such as the popular Broken Picture Phone web game. Similar to the previous randomizers, this one has multiple modes for gameplay, such as an open world setting that gives you access to all key items at the beginning of the game. However, I want to focus on the monolith that is the Ancient Cave. The cave takes the 8 sanctuaries normally required by the game and places one of each at the end of a floor. A floor is basically a bunch of rooms made into a maze, with a set path to the end where a boss is waiting for you. That gives us a total of 9 floors, 8 of them having sanctuary bosses, and the last one having a final boss at the end. Like the regular Ancient Cave, you start with nothing, and the rewards get progressively better as you progress through the game. Unlike the regular Ancient Cave, you have tons of customizable options that make for an incredible experience. Enabling glitch sprites allows you to peep the horror if that's your type of thing. Custom music tracks are an option if you want to hear any bangers with an Earthbound sound font, and there's even randomly generated dialogue for the Pokey and Gygas fight that'll leave you rolling. Top this off with a Super Series tournament held by the community each year to etch the winner's name into the credits for all of eternity, and you get an experience that is a blast. Generated seeds can vary in length, ranging from a couple of hours with difficult seeds to just under 30 minutes for the fastest completions ever done. So if you wanted to learn and do a run, it's fairly quick to pick up. Before we go to our number 2 item, I'd like to give a quick honorable mention to J. Tomar's PK Scramble Randomizer that is a massive key item shuffler. The reasoning for me not listing this one is similar to the other one that I mentioned earlier. I wanted to keep the randomizers listed to 1 per game or series if possible. Hey look, it's our local randomizer mastermind Abyssanim back with a creation that comes in our top 2 of this list. The SMRPG Randomizers started as a release by him back in 2016, with the current version being a massive open world experience being maintained by developers such as Dorkmaster Fleck, Pidge01, and several others. Like some of our other top games, the SMRPG experience has been changed completely to allow for an open world, and thus changing the progression of the game entirely, though the goal of the game is to still beat Smithy at the end. As such, the stars that are required to get through the game can be randomized, the starting party member can be changed to whoever you want, and you can even exclude some party members if you wanted to do a single character run. As for times to complete this randomizer quickly, you can expect to see runs clocking in at about 2.5 hours on average. The reason that this comes near top of my list is not just the amount of features that this has, but also the passion that this community has for the game overall. It makes for one of the best randomizer experiences out there, and if you haven't played it yet, then you absolutely should. However, despite all of its praises that I'm singing, there is one more randomizer that I believe sits above the rest. The Final Fantasy IV Free Enterprise Randomizer comes at the top of this list. With the initial release back in January of 2018 by developer Boardface, it still is actively maintained to this day, and it changes Final Fantasy IV into a completely different experience. The randomizer follows the idea that you have access to the airship, the Free Enterprise, at the beginning of the game, making this an open world randomizer like some of our previous entries. The main goal is to collect 7 crystals around the world spread randomly to major events, and head to the moon to fight Zeromus. Runners can do this in several ways, and there's even a special pass item that allows players to take a shortcut in Toroya to the final boss room if they want to challenge him early. With the base gameplay out of the way, it's worth saying that I can't even begin to go into the amount of settings the player can change in this game. Like, there's so much to unpack. So let's go to what matters the most. The harp song that Edward plays during the twin harp cutscene is random, and there's 156 possible songs that can play. Another cool cosmetic change is that the Zeromus sprite for the final boss battle has one of 447 different variations that can show up. I can't unpack all the features here, so check out the link below to see what all is possible. While all this is huge, the biggest thing going for it is how much community support there is for the randomizer's development and activity. You could probably look right now for a live stream of Free Enterprise and find either someone doing a solo run or even a race. Not only that, but the Discord server facilitates not only a welcoming community to help beginners, but also massive tournaments and events to keep folks excited about the game. Right now, the Adamant Cup series is taking place with certain rule sets for matches between players, and that is only one of many they've hosted already. The community keeps things fresh by holding these events with special rule sets, and allowing the winners of these events to hold a permanent spot in the in-game Hall of Fame credits. If you wanted to take this excellent randomizer on, set a few hours aside with a guide for an optimal experience. With all these features, activity, and many more reasons, I've put this game on the top of my list as the best RPG randomizer of all time for speedrunning. While these are ranked from bottom to top, all of the RPG randomizers I've listed here are amazing, and you should check them out in the description below. As always, stay hydrated folks, and thanks for watching.